Welcome, dear friend, to another quiet journey into the past. Tonight, we drift back to the 2nd century before Christ, an age when Rome's shadow was spreading across the Mediterranean and Greece's old glories were fading into memory. Whether you're resting after a long day or lying beneath the calm silence of night, thank you for letting me keep you company. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Is it dawn's first light, or the hush of evening? If you find comfort in gentle stories from long ago, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Together, we'll uncover a story that shaped the world as we know it, the story of Polybius, the man who tried to understand the heartbeat of power itself. Polybius was born around 200 BCE in Megalopolis, a proud city of ancient Greece. He grew up in a world of philosophers and warriors, where the memory of Alexander still lingered, and every child was taught to revere honor and reason. His father, Lycortas, was a statesman, wise, cautious, and devoted to his people. From an early age, Polybius was trained not for comfort, but for service, in politics, in arms, and in intellect. He learned that power was both the gift and a danger, something that could elevate or destroy. No one could have known then that this thoughtful young man would one day witness the very mechanisms of empire from within Rome itself. When Rome conquered Greece after the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE, Polybius's life changed forever. He was among the 1,000 Greek hostages taken to Italy, not as prisoners of chains, but as prisoners of politics. Yet fate was strange and kind to him. In Rome, Polybius found himself among the elite, chosen as tutor and companion to Scipio Aemilianus, the adopted grandson of the great Scipio Africanus. What began as captivity became a window into the heart of Roman power. He studied their senate, their generals, their citizens, and what he saw amazed him. Here was a republic unlike any he had ever known, disciplined, organized, and ambitious beyond imagination. Polybius was not content to be a passive observer. He asked questions few dared to ask. Why had Rome succeeded where others failed? Why did empires rise, and why did they crumble? To find answers, he traveled with Roman armies, stood beside Scipio at sieges, and witnessed the destruction of Carthage, a city that burned while the world changed forever. Polybius understood that power was not random, it followed patterns. His great work, the Histories, sought to explain those patterns not through myths or divine favor, but through cause, system, and human nature. For him, history was not a tale to entertain, it was a teacher, the truest guide to understanding our world. In his Histories, Polybius described how Rome built its empire, through discipline, balanced government, and relentless ambition. He saw the Roman constitution as a masterpiece, a system that balanced monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, preventing any one part from becoming too strong. To him, Rome's greatness came not from luck, but from its structure, from its ability to adapt, to learn, and to unite its citizens under a shared purpose. His analysis was astonishingly modern. Centuries later, Thinkers like Machiavelli, Montesquieu, and even the framers of the U.S. Constitution would draw from Polybius's model of mixed government. He had peered into the anatomy of empire, and what he found still beats in the heart of nations today.
As Polybius wrote, he warned that every empire carries within itself the seeds of decay. He believed that history was a cycle, that monarchies turned into tyrannies, aristocracies into oligarchies, and democracies into mob rule. And when corruption finally spread, a new ruler would rise again, restoring order before the circle began anew. He called this eternal turning of systems anacyclosis, the great wheel of political life. To him, it was not fate or gods that destroyed civilizations, but human nature itself, our greed, our pride, our forgetfulness of virtue. In quiet words that echo even now, he reminded us that no empire, however mighty, is immune from time. Polybius's vision of history was built on experience, not imagination. He refused to write what he had not seen or verified. He traveled across continents, walked through the ruins of battlefields, and interviewed those who had witnessed events firsthand. In his mind, the historian was not a storyteller, but a judge, weighing evidence, questioning motives, and separating truth from rumor. He wrote, "The purpose of history is not to entertain, but to instruct." And so, line by line, he built a work that was less like a poem and more like an engine of thought, a careful map of how humanity behaves when power calls its name. Yet Polybius was more than an observer. He was a man of deep feeling. He admired Rome's discipline, but he never forgot his Greek soul. He longed for the grace of Athens, the wisdom of Plato, and the harmony of the old Hellenic world. Sometimes, in the silence between his words, one can sense his melancholy, the sorrow of a man who understood that the age of Greece had ended. Rome was powerful, but it was not beautiful. It conquered, but it did not dream. Through Polybius, we can almost hear the sigh of a civilization passing into memory, as another takes its place beneath the same unchanging stars. In time, Polybius became one of Rome's quiet counselors. He advised Scipio on campaigns, guided senators through questions of governance, and recorded events others were too proud to note. He earned the respect of conquerors, not through flattery, but through wisdom. When he returned to Greece years later, he helped rebuild cities devastated by war, urging peace and moderation instead of vengeance. History, he said, was not only a record of past wounds, but a medicine for future ones. For him, to study history was to serve humanity. Every event, every downfall, every triumph was a lesson written in the dust of time. As his life drew toward its quiet close, Polybius returned once more to the hills of Greece. He had seen empires rise, cities burn, and heroes fade. Yet he carried no bitterness, only understanding. He knew that power, like the tide, must always come and go. When he finally passed away, sometime around 118 BCE, there were no monuments raised in his name, no crowds to mourn him. But perhaps that was fitting, for Polybius believed that truth itself was monument enough. And though centuries have passed, his voice still whispers through the pages of history, reminding us that wisdom outlasts conquest and understanding outlives all empires.
After his death, Polybius's works began their own uncertain journey through time. Scrolls were copied by hand, passed between libraries and monasteries, lost in fires, and rediscovered centuries later by scholars who could barely believe what they read. His insights on politics, balance, and the fragility of power survived the fall of empires themselves. In medieval Europe, few even knew his name. But in the Renaissance, thinkers searching for reason in chaos found him again, and treated his words like buried treasure. He had written of Rome, yet his lessons spoke to every age, that order must be earned and freedom must be guarded by understanding, not pride. As Europe awakened to new ideas, Polybius's voice rose once more. Machiavelli studied him while shaping his own sharp vision of power. The founding fathers of America read him as they debated the meaning of government and liberty. They saw in his concept of mixed constitutions, monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy held in balance, a reflection of what they hoped to build. It was strange, perhaps, that a Greek captive of Rome would become an unwitting guide for nations born 2 millennia later. But that is the quiet immortality of wisdom. It travels farther than armies and lasts longer than marble. Even today, when historians debate how power rises and falls, Polybius's thoughts remain alive. His cycle of government, from monarchy to tyranny to aristocracy to oligarchy and then to democracy, feels hauntingly familiar. He had seen this pattern unfold across centuries, but he might just as easily have been describing the modern world. Nations still rise on discipline and collapse under division. And though technology changes, human nature does not. Polybius's warning still drifts across time. Those who ignore history are doomed not just to repeat it, but to never understand why. What makes Polybius unique is not only what he wrote, but how he felt about truth itself. He never surrendered to myth nor to flattery. He saw history as a sacred duty, a bridge between what was and what will be. In every word, he asked his readers to be awake, to see beyond pride, and to recognize the quiet laws that shape all human destiny. Perhaps that is why reading him feels less like looking into the past and more like gazing into a mirror. For in his careful lines, we see our reflection, curious, ambitious, fragile, and endlessly repeating the same story. So when the night grows still and the noise of the world fades, think of Polybius, the prisoner who became a philosopher of power. He walked through empires not as a conqueror, but as a witness, seeing clearly what others ignored. His pen, not the sword, carved his memory into eternity. And though his bones turned to dust long ago, his wisdom still breathes through every historian who dares to question the truth behind triumph. History, he taught us, is not a graveyard of the past. It is a living conversation between the present and the eternal. And in that conversation, Polybius still speaks.
Centuries after his death, Polybius's name faded into the quiet holes of forgotten libraries. Dust gathered on his manuscripts, yet his ideas slept like seeds in the soil, waiting for another age to need them. When wars tore through Europe, when kingdoms fell to revolutions and republics turned to chaos, his words seemed to rise again from the ashes. He had seen it all before, long ago. The faces changed, the weapons evolved, but the pattern remained. Polybius had mapped not events, but the human condition, the restless hunger for power, and the fragile search for order. It was not prophecy, it was recognition. What truly sets Polybius apart is his courage to face complexity. While others simplified history into legends or heroes, he accepted that truth was messy, layered, and often uncomfortable. He believed wisdom began when we stopped asking who was right and started asking what was real. He saw how fear shapes decisions, how ambition disguises itself as duty, and how nations convince themselves that conquest is virtue. And in revealing those illusions, he gave humanity a mirror it rarely wants to face. That perhaps is why his work endures, because he dared to describe us as we truly are. When modern scholars rediscovered his writings, they found not just a historian, but a psychologist of civilization. He had understood how power changes hearts, how luxury softens nations, and how memory fades faster than lessons learned. He wrote that the greatest danger to any people was not invasion, but comfort. For once a nation forgets struggle, it forgets virtue, and with it, the will to endure. These warnings, written 20 centuries ago, feel eerily present today. Perhaps that is why Polybius seems to whisper across the ages, not from pride, but from compassion for those doomed to repeat the same mistakes. If we listen closely, Polybius is not only telling Rome's story, he's telling ours. He teaches that history is not distant, but alive inside every decision we make. When we glorify victory without reflection, when we trade justice for convenience, when we forget humility in power, we replay the same ancient tragedy. And maybe that is why his words still matter, because he believed that understanding the past could heal the future. He offered no comfort, only clarity, a gift far rarer than hope and far more enduring. So, tonight, as you rest and let the noise of the world fall away, remember the quiet voice of Polybius. He was not a conqueror, not a king, not even a free man for much of his life, yet his words have outlived them all. He showed that wisdom needs no crown, and truth asks for no reward. History, he said, is the torch we pass from one age to the next, not to worship the light, but to keep the darkness from returning. And as the centuries drift onward, that torch still burns. For Polybius, and for all who listen, it is the same eternal flame of understanding, guiding us gently through the long night of time.